The firelight cast dancing shadows across the rough-hewn walls of the wickiup as Chogan lay motionless beneath his woolen blankets. His breathing carefully measured and deep. Through barely parted eyelids, he watched the pregnant woman moving silently through his dwelling, her swollen belly evident even beneath the loose fabric of her worn deerskin dress. Najoni had been working as his helper for 4 months now, ever since she'd arrived at his remote Sierra Madre mountain camp, with nothing but the clothes on her back and desperation in her dark eyes. Tonight, he had decided to test her character in a way that would reveal her true nature. What he witnessed in the next few minutes would shake him to his very core and change both their lives forever. The storm had been raging for 2 days, trapping them both in the isolated dwelling perched high on Eagle Mountain. Chogan had built his fortune in trading, accumulating wealth that most men could only dream of. But he had learned through bitter experience that money attracted the wrong kind of people. His late wife had married him for his fortune, not his heart, and her betrayal had left scars deeper than any physical wound. Since her death 4 years ago, he had retreated to this mountain sanctuary, employing only the most desperate souls who had nowhere else to turn. They were less likely to rob him blind and disappear into the night. Or so he had reasoned. Najoni was different, though. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that intrigued him, despite her obvious poverty and condition. The father of her child was nowhere to be found, and she had never spoken of him in all the time she had worked for Chogan. She performed her duties with meticulous care, never asking for more than the modest wage he provided, never complaining about the isolation or the harsh mountain weather. But Chogan had learned not to trust appearances. Tonight's test would reveal whether she was truly the honest woman she appeared to be, or just another opportunist waiting for the right moment to strike. He had deliberately left his leather pouch containing 50 pieces of silver on the central hearth before retiring to his sleeping area. The silver was meant to pay his suppliers in the next village once the storm cleared, but Najoni didn't know that. To her, it would appear to be a fortune carelessly abandoned by a wealthy man who had too much to keep track of. The question was what she would do when she discovered it during her late-night activities. From his position on the bed, Chogan could see into the main room through the partially open hide curtain. Najoni moved with the careful grace of a woman accustomed to hard work. Despite her advanced pregnancy, she was perhaps 8 months along, he estimated, though she had never confirmed the exact timing. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and even in the dim firelight, he could see the exhaustion etched in the lines around her brown eyes. She had been working since dawn, preparing meals, cleaning, and maintaining the dwelling with the same thoroughness she brought to every task. The wind howled outside, rattling the hide coverings and sending occasional puffs of smoke back down the central opening. Najoni paused in her movements, one hand resting protectively on her belly as she gazed toward the entrance. Chogan wondered what she was thinking about in these quiet moments. Did she fear for her future? Did she regret the choices that had brought her to this isolated mountain? He found himself genuinely curious about her thoughts, which surprised him. He had spent so long guarding his heart that he had forgotten what it felt like to care about another person's inner world. Najoni resumed her work, moving to the cooking area where she began organizing the supplies they had used for dinner. Her movements were economical and purposeful, wasting no motion. She wiped down the wooden surfaces with a damp cloth, then turned her attention to the bowls they had used for their simple meal of rabbit stew and cornbread. As she worked, she hummed softly under her breath, a melody Chogan didn't recognize but found strangely comforting. It was then that she noticed the leather pouch on the hearth. Chogan held his breath, watching as she approached it slowly. The firelight caught the worn leather, and he could see her eyes widen as she realized what it was. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached toward it, then stopped. For a long moment she simply stood there, staring at the pouch as if it were a dangerous animal that might bite her. Chogan's heart pounded in his chest as he waited to see what she would do. Would she open it? Would she take some of the silver and hope he wouldn't notice? Would she stuff the entire pouch under her bedding and claim ignorance in the morning? He had seen good people do terrible things when faced with desperate circumstances, and Najoni's situation was certainly desperate. A pregnant woman alone in the world had few options and even fewer resources, but Najoni surprised him. Instead of opening the pouch or moving it to a hiding place, she carefully lifted it and carried it to Chogan's sleeping area. She spoke softly through the hide curtain, her voice barely above a whisper as she called out, "Chogan, you left your silver on the hearth. I thought you might want it somewhere safe." Chogan forced himself to remain still, continuing his pretense of deep sleep. He heard Nizhoni's footsteps retreat, then return a few minutes later. Through his barely open eyes, he watched as she placed the pouch on the small table beside his bed, positioning it where he would be sure to see it when he woke. But she didn't stop there. From somewhere in the folds of her dress, she produced a small piece of birch bark and a charcoal stick. By the dim light filtering in from the main room, she wrote something on the bark and placed it beneath the pouch. As she turned to leave, Chogan caught a glimpse of her face in profile. There were tears streaming down her cheeks, though she made no sound. The sight of those silent tears struck him like a physical blow. Here was a woman who had every reason to take what she needed, who could have justified theft to survival, yet she had chosen honesty even when it cost her dearly. The realization that she was crying, presumably over her own desperate situation, made Chogan's chest tighten with an emotion he hadn't felt in years. Nizhoni returned to the cooking area and continued her work, but Chogan could see the change in her posture. Her shoulders sagged with exhaustion and something deeper, a weariness that went beyond physical fatigue. She moved more slowly now, pausing frequently to rest one hand on her back or her swollen belly. The baby was clearly taking its toll on her strength, yet she persevered with her duties without complaint. As the night wore on, Chogan found himself studying Nizhoni with new eyes. He noticed how she saved the smallest portions of food for herself, always ensuring there was plenty for him. He saw how she mended her own worn clothing by firelight after finishing her daily tasks, never asking for money to purchase new garments. He observed the way she spoke gently to the camp dogs that sometimes wandered into the wickiup, sharing scraps of her meager meals with them, despite her own hunger. Most telling of all was what he witnessed when she thought herself completely alone. Nizhoni would sometimes place both hands on her belly and speak softly to her unborn child, telling the baby about the mountains and the wildlife, describing the beauty of the sunrise over the peaks, painting pictures of hope and wonder despite their uncertain circumstances. In those moments, Chogan saw not a desperate woman seeking to take advantage of his wealth, but a mother trying to create a better world for her child through the power of her own love and determination. The test he had devised suddenly seemed cruel and unnecessary. Nizhoni had already proven her character through months of honest work and selfless behavior. The silver pieces were simply one more confirmation of what he should have recognized long ago, that she was a woman of integrity trapped in impossible circumstances. The realization filled him with shame for doubting her, but also with something else he hadn't expected to feel again: hope. As dawn approached, Nizhoni finally allowed herself to rest, settling into the woven mat by the fire with a heavy sigh. She placed her hands on her belly and closed her eyes, but Chogan could tell she wasn't really sleeping. Her breathing remained too alert, too aware of her surroundings. She was a woman accustomed to danger, ready to flee at a moment's notice if necessary. The thought of what she might have endured before coming to his mountain sanctuary made Chogan's jaw clench with protective anger. When the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the smoke hole, Chogan finally allowed himself to wake up. He stretched and yawned convincingly, then made a show of looking around for his missing pouch. His eyes fell on the note Nizhoni had left beneath it, and he unfolded the bark with trembling fingers. In her careful markings, she had written, "Chogan, I found this on the hearth. I hope you don't mind that I moved it to your sleeping area. I was afraid it might not be safe left out in the open. I pray that you will forgive my presumption. Respectfully, Nizhoni." Fresh tears spilled down Nizhoni's cheeks, but she wiped them away quickly. "Thank you for saying that. It means more to me than you know, but I understand if you feel you can no longer trust me to work in your home. I can pack my things and be gone by this afternoon if you prefer." "Gone?" Chogan stared at her in shock. "Nizhoni, why would you think I want you to leave?" "Because now you know that I'm desperate enough to be tempted by silver left carelessly about," she replied with quiet dignity. "Even though I didn't take it. The fact that I noticed it, that I was aware of what it could mean for me and my baby, that proves I'm not above such thoughts. A truly honest person wouldn't have even seen it as a temptation." Chogan reached across the space between them and gently covered her hands with his own. The contact sent an unexpected jolt of warmth through him, and he saw Nijoni's eyes widen in surprise at the gesture. Nijoni, being tempted doesn't make you dishonest. It makes you human. What matters is what you chose to do despite that temptation. You chose to protect me and my property even when it cost you personally. That's not the action of someone I want to dismiss. It's the action of someone I want to keep close. The words hung in the air between them, carrying implications that neither of them had expected. Chogan realized he had revealed more than he intended, but he found he didn't regret the honesty. Nijoni's presence had brought something back to life in him that he thought had died with his wife's betrayal. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it, the hope that perhaps not everyone in the world was motivated purely by self-interest. Nijoni stared down at their joined hands, her breathing shallow and quick. Chogan, I need to tell you something about my situation, about how I came to be here, and about the child I'm carrying. You have a right to know who you're employing. Chogan squeezed her hands gently. You don't owe me explanations about your past, Nijoni. What matters to me is who you are now, how you conduct yourself, how you treat others. I've seen your character demonstrated every day for 4 months. That's worth more than any story about how you came to be here. But you should know, Nijoni insisted, her voice growing stronger. The father of my child was a man I thought I could trust. He was charming and well-spoken, and he promised me marriage. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because I was lonely and naive. When I told him about the baby, he disappeared in the night, taking what little possessions I had saved along with him. She paused, gathering courage to continue. I had no family to turn to, no friends who would help a woman in my condition. I tried to find work in the Valley settlement, but no one would hire me once my pregnancy became obvious. I was sleeping in the woods and eating roots and berries when I heard about a wealthy trader up in the mountains who might need domestic help. I walked for 4 days to reach your camp, and when you offered me work and shelter, it felt like a miracle. Chogan felt his jaw clench with anger at the unnamed man who had abandoned Nijoni in such a callous manner. I'm sorry you went through that, he said quietly. No woman should have to face such circumstances alone, but I'm grateful that your journey led you to my door. You've brought something to this place that was missing, something I didn't even realize I needed. What's that? Nijoni asked softly. Life, Chogan replied simply. Purpose. The sound of another person moving through these rooms. The knowledge that someone else calls this place home, even temporarily. I didn't realize how isolated I had become until you arrived and showed me what I was missing. Nijoni's tears began to fall again. But these seemed different from the ones she had shed the night before. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, of something approaching hope. I don't know what to say, she whispered. I've been so afraid that when you learned about my past, about my situation, you would send me away. I don't know what I would have done if that had happened. You don't have to worry about that, Chogan assured her. You have a place here for as long as you want it. And when your baby comes, there will be a place for him or her as well. This mountain can be lonely, but it can also be a sanctuary for those who need one. The promise in his words was clear, and Nijoni's face transformed with an expression of such profound relief and gratitude that Chogan felt his heart constrict. How long had she been carrying this fear? How many nights had she lain awake wondering when the axe would fall, when she would once again find herself alone and homeless? There's something else I need to tell you, Chogan continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone. The test I put you through last night, it wasn't just about the silver. It was about trust and about my own fears. My late wife, she married me for my fortune, not for love. When I discovered her true motives, it nearly destroyed my faith in human nature. I've been living up here like a hermit, convinced that everyone who showed interest in me was really just interested in my wealth. Nijoni listened intently, her brown eyes reflecting understanding and compassion. That must have been terribly painful, she said softly, to discover that someone you loved and trusted had deceived you so completely. It was, Chogan admitted, but watching you these past months, seeing how you conduct yourself when you think no one is paying attention, it's helped me remember that not everyone is motivated by greed. You've shown me that there are still people in this world who choose to do what's right simply because it's right, not because they expect to be rewarded for it. I've had to learn to rely on my own moral compass, Nijoni replied quietly. When you have nothing else, when you've lost everything you thought you could count on, your integrity becomes the only thing that truly belongs to you. It's the only thing that can't be taken away unless you give it up willingly. Her words struck Chogan with their simple wisdom. Here was a woman who had lost everything, who had been betrayed and abandoned. Yet she had emerged from those trials with her moral center intact. She hadn't allowed her circumstances to corrupt her values or justify dishonest behavior. In many ways, she was stronger than he was, more resilient in the face of adversity. "I want to make you an offer," Chogan said, his heart pounding as he spoke the words that would change both their lives. Not as an employer to an employee, but as one person to another who has found something unexpected and valuable. Nijoni's breathing quickened, and she gripped his hands more tightly. "What kind of offer?" "Stay here permanently," Chogan said. "Not as my helper, but as my partner. Help me turn this lonely mountain sanctuary into a real home. Raise your child here where they'll be safe and loved and provided for. Let me be the father figure that child deserves, and let me be the man you deserve. Someone who will value you for who you are rather than what you can provide." The proposal hung in the air between them, revolutionary in its implications. Chogan was offering not just security and shelter, but partnership and family. He was asking Nijoni to trust him with her future and her child's future, to believe that his feelings were genuine and not motivated by loneliness or pity. Nijoni's eyes searched his face intently, looking for any sign of deception or false promises. What she saw there seemed to reassure her because her expression gradually softened into something approaching wonder. "You would do that? You would take on another man's child and raise them as your own?" "That child will be yours," Chogan replied firmly. "That makes them precious to me. Besides, biology doesn't make a father. Love and commitment and daily presence, those are what make a father. I can offer all of those things if you'll let me." Nijoni was quiet for a long moment, her hands still clasped in his, her eyes focused on some internal landscape he couldn't see. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "I need to know that you're not offering this out of pity or guilt about the test you put me through. I need to know that this is something you truly want, not something you feel obligated to offer." "Look at me, Nijoni," Chogan said gently. When she raised her eyes to meet his, he continued with absolute sincerity. "I'm offering this because somewhere over the past 4 months I stopped seeing you as my employee and started seeing you as the woman who makes my meals just the way I like them without being asked. The woman who hums while she works and makes this dwelling feel alive. The woman who talks to her unborn baby about the beauty of the mountains and fills this place with hope instead of loneliness." He paused, gathering courage for the most important words he had ever spoken. "I'm offering this because I've fallen in love with you, Nijoni. Not with your situation or your need for rescue, but with you. Your strength, your integrity, your gentle spirit. Your determination to do what's right no matter how difficult it becomes. I want to build a life with you. Not because you need saving, but because you make me want to be the best version of myself." Nijoni's tears began to fall freely now, and she made no attempt to wipe them away. "I love you too," she whispered. "I've been trying not to, telling myself it was impossible, that you could never see me as anything more than a desperate woman you took pity on. But I love the way you treat me with respect and kindness, the way you never make me feel ashamed of my circumstances. I love your quiet strength and your generous heart, even when you try to hide it behind gruff words and suspicious tests." Chogan stood and pulled Nijoni gently to her feet, mindful of her pregnant condition. For a moment they simply stood there, hands clasped, looking into each other's faces and seeing the future they would build together. Then Chogan reached up and cupped Nijoni's face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "I promise you," he said solemnly, "that I will never test your honesty again. I will never doubt your word or question your motives. You've proven yourself to me in every way that matters, and I trust you completely." "And I promise you," Nijoni replied, her voice steady despite her tears, "that I will never give you reason to doubt that trust. I will be honest with you always, even when the truth is difficult. I will work beside you to build the kind of life and home we both deserve." They sealed their promises with a kiss that was gentle and reverent, full of hope for the future rather than passion for the moment. It was the kiss of two people who had found something precious and rare, and who intended to cherish and protect it for the rest of their lives. When they broke apart, Chogan rested his forehead against Nijoni's, his hands still cradling her face. "We should start planning," he said softly. "The baby will need a proper sleeping area, and we'll need to make arrangements for the birth. The healer in the next village is a good woman and her daughter is an experienced midwife. When the spring thaw comes, we can travel down and speak with them." Nijoni nodded, her eyes bright with excitement and hope. "I'd like that. And Chogan, I want you to know that I don't expect you to change your whole life for me. I know you value your privacy and your independence. I don't want to take that away from you." "You're not taking anything away," Chogan assured her. "You're adding to my life in ways I never imagined possible. This mountain will always be our sanctuary, but it doesn't have to be a prison of isolation. We can have visitors when we choose, travel to the village when we need to, live as openly or as privately as we decide together." The conversation continued as they moved through their morning routine, but everything felt different now. The simple acts of preparing breakfast and tending to daily chores were transformed by the knowledge that they were no longer employer and employee, but partners building a life together. Nijoni moved with new confidence, no longer afraid that her position was temporary or conditional. Chogan found himself noticing details he had overlooked before. The way Nijoni's face lit up when she talked about the baby, the unconscious grace with which she moved despite her pregnancy, the quiet contentment that seemed to radiate from her now that her future was secure. As the day progressed, they began making practical plans for their new life together. Chogan showed Nijoni the space that could be converted into a child's area, and they discussed what furnishings and supplies would be needed. They talked about names for the baby, about how to manage the household duties as Nijoni's pregnancy progressed, about the changes they would need to make to accommodate a growing family. But beneath all the practical considerations lay a deeper transformation. The test that Chogan had devised to expose Nijoni's true character had instead exposed his own capacity for love and trust. The woman he had suspected of potential dishonesty had proven to be more honest than he had dared to hope, and in doing so she had restored his faith in human goodness. The desperate circumstances that had brought Nijoni to his mountain had led her not to compromise her values but to demonstrate them more clearly than ever before. As evening approached and they sat together by the fire, Nijoni's head resting on Chogan's shoulder while his hand lay protectively over her swollen belly, both of them understood that they had found something extraordinary. They had discovered that love could grow from the most unlikely circumstances, that trust could be rebuilt after betrayal, and that two wounded souls could heal each other through patience, honesty, and unwavering commitment to doing what was right. The baby kicked beneath Chogan's hand and Nijoni laughed softly. "I think someone approves of our new arrangement," she said, covering his hand with her own. "Smart child," Chogan replied, pressing a kiss to the top of Nijoni's head. "Takes after their mother." Outside, the wind that had been howling for days began to quiet, and the first stars appeared through the clearing clouds. The storm that had trapped them together in the dwelling was finally passing, but neither Chogan nor Nijoni felt any urgency to venture beyond their mountain sanctuary. They had everything they needed right here: love, trust, hope for the future, and the promise of a family built on the solid foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection. The test was over, and they had both passed with honors. Now the real adventure could begin, the adventure of building a life together based on the truth they had discovered in each other's hearts. In the dancing firelight of their mountain dwelling, surrounded by the vast wilderness of the Sierra Madre peaks, Chogan and Nijoni had found their way home to each other, and to the family they would create together through love, patience, and the courage to trust again after betrayal. The leather pouch still sat on the bedside table where Nijoni had placed it, but it no longer represented a test or a temptation. It had become instead a symbol of the integrity that had brought them together, a reminder that sometimes the greatest treasures in life come not from silver or gold, but from the precious metal of human character tested and proven true. As they sat together in the warm glow of their hearth, planning their future and feeling their child move within Nijoni's womb, both Chogan and Nijoni understood that they had discovered something far more valuable than any fortune hidden in mountain caves or buried in secret places. They had found each other, and in doing so they had found their way back to hope, to trust, and to the kind of love that endures through all seasons and weathers all storms.